Some stories are buried, some are silenced, and some are sealed behind locked files. For years, rumors surrounded powerful names, private islands, secret flights, and a man who seemed untouchable. Jeffrey Epstein. A financier. A mystery, a scandal that shook the world, yet left more questions than answers. Who knew? Who was involved? And why do so many documents remain hidden from the public? Tonight, we don't follow theories. We follow the files. This is the story behind the Epstein documents, what they reveal, and what they carefully avoid saying. The Epstein files are a collection of millions of documents, images and videos detailing the criminal activities of American financier and convicted child sex offender Jeffrey Epstein, including his social circle of public figures, politicians, and celebrities. The files are documents collected as evidence in the criminal cases against Epstein and his associates, stored as over 300 gigabytes of data, plus other media. In the FBI's Sentinel case management system, they include his contacts book, flight logs of his planes, and court documents. Many of the records and files relating to Epstein belong to his estate, which is currently run by lawyer Darren Indike and accountant Richard Kahn. In November 2025, the U.S. House of Representatives passed the Epstein Files Transparency Act, and the U.S. Senate unanimously approved it, with President Donald Trump signing the bill the next day. The following month, the U.S. Department of Justice released a relatively small amount of files, leading to bipartisan criticism. Trump had previously floated the idea of releasing the files during his 2024 presidential campaign, though he later claimed that controversies surrounding the files were fabricated by members of the Democratic Party. On January 30th, 2026, an additional 3 million pages were released, including 2,000 videos and 180,000 images. Though the Department of Justice acknowledged that a total of 6 million pages might qualify as files required to be released, it stated that the January 30 release would be the final one, and that it had met its legal obligations. The released files mentioned a number of public figures and led to increased scrutiny of their activities. In 1996, Maria Farmer reported to the police that Epstein had stolen naked photos of her underage siblings, though no investigation was conducted. In 2005, a woman reported to Florida's Palm Beach Police Department that her 14-year-old stepdaughter had been taken to Epstein's mansion and paid to strip and massage Epstein. Following an investigation, Epstein was indicted and accepted a plea deal in 2008. He was indicted again in 2019 and died in prison. Epstein cultivated a social circle of public figures that included politicians and celebrities. This fueled conspiracy theories that Epstein kept a list of clients to whom he had trafficked young girls, that he used it to blackmail them, and that he was killed by them. These theories were disseminated widely after his 2019 death, including by then-President Donald Trump, and again in 2025. The FBI began investigating Epstein in 2006, following reports that he had been paying underage girls for sex in his Florida home. In 2007, federal prosecutors prepared a draft indictment consisting of 32 counts against Epstein and 2 of his employees for enticement of minors and sex trafficking. Ultimately, U.S. Attorney Alexander Acosta signed off on a deal that allowed Epstein to avoid federal prosecution. Epstein instead pleaded guilty to a state charge of soliciting prostitution from someone under age 18 and received an 80-month jail sentence. No charges were presented against his employees. The draft indictment described Epstein as an extremely high flight risk and, from information we have received, a continued danger to the community based upon his continued enticement of underage girls. It described many crimes that were ultimately not prosecuted in favor of Epstein's plea deal. Emails from 2019 show that shortly after Epstein's 2019 arrest, FBI agents discussed contacting 10 alleged co-conspirators in order to serve them with grand jury summaries. The emails do not name the majority of alleged co-conspirators, but notes that city or state each is in an FBI agent. Noted in the email that 3 have been located in FL and served grand jury subpoenas. Una pulgada Boston, una pulgada N y C, and 1 in C were located and served. An email the following day identified Ghislaine Maxwell as one of the alleged co-conspirators. Federal prosecutors in the Southern District of New York produced an 86-page memo called investigation into potential co-conspirators of Jeffrey Epstein that was sent to U.S. Attorney Jeffrey Berman on December 19, 2019. The memo contains statements of 24 women who reported being abused by Epstein as minors and 14 who reported being abused by Epstein as adults. One of the women told prosecutors that Epstein had told her to give massages to 2 men in 2011 or 2012, and that one of the men tried to sexually assault her and the other man forced her to touch his genitals and then raped her. The FBI has not commented on whether or not the men were investigated. The files also contained FBI interview notes with an employee at Epstein's Florida estate who described duties such as fanning $100 bills on a table near Epstein's bed, disposing of used condoms, and placing a gun between Epstein's mattresses. The employee also told the FBI in 2007 that Epstein once had him buy flowers and deliver them to a student at Royal Palm Beach High School to commemorate her performance in a school play. One document detailed a diagram of Epstein's inner circle, including Maxwell, his lawyer, Darren Indyke, and his accountant, Richard Kahn. The undated diagram also showed Jean-Luc Brunel, a French model agent with long-time ties to Epstein, who faced rape charges in France before dying by suicide in a French jail in 2022. The document listed other close associates, including Epstein's personal chef, pilots, and Peter Listerman, a model scout described in the file as a subject witness and model matchmaker. It also listed Les Wexner, the billionaire business magnate who employed Epstein as a money manager and has said he severed ties with Epstein in 2007. The diagram indicated that the DOJ had been investigating people close to Epstein for potential involvement. Other individuals identified were known Epstein employees, none of whom were charged. The Justice Department redacted the names and photographs of 5 other individuals on the diagram, including Maxwell's assistant and 4 Epstein employees, one of whom was listed as a girlfriend employee. Victims and advocates criticized the Justice Department for what they characterized as heavy but inconsistent redactions of names and details throughout the release documents. The release also detailed Epstein's associations with numerous prominent individuals. The documents further illustrated how Epstein's relationships with powerful figures persisted even after he became a convicted sex offender in 2008, contradicting or undermining years of public denials from some associates. The files contain market-sensitive and secret information stemming from the heart of the UK government, which appears to have been sent to Epstein by Peter Mandelson. One email sent to Epstein from a redacted address in August 2009 appeared to reveal Prime Minister Gordon Brown's pseudonym, John Pond, along with Brown's secure email address. The files contain a late 2010 email by Al Seckel to Epstein, in which he mentions Epstein's mugshot on Wikipedia, and that he was trying to replace it with a friendly picture of Epstein, in addition to removing the term sex offender from Epstein's article on Wikipedia. At a time when Epstein was trying to rebuild his public image after being released from jail in July 2009, the released files included emails between investigators regarding Epstein's death, including an investigator's observation that his final communication did not appear to be a suicide note. Multiple investigations have determined that Epstein's death was a suicide. The records also detailed a tactic that jail staffers used to evade media gathered outside the Metropolitan Correctional Center when Epstein's body was removed. Staff used boxers and sheets to create what appeared to be a body and loaded it into a white van, labeled as belonging to the office of the chief medical examiner. Reporters followed the van when it departed the jail, not knowing that Epstein's actual body had been loaded into a black vehicle, which left unnoticed. According to the interview notes, Epstein signed a 32-page trust 2 days before his death. The document names 40 beneficiaries of his $600 million estate. He left $100 million to his girlfriend, Belarusian dentist Karina. He also left $50 million to his personal lawyer, Darren Indyke, and $25 million to his accountant, Richard Kahn. Indyke and Kahn were named as co-executors of Epstein's estate. He left Ghislaine Maxwell and his brother Mark Epstein $10 million each, and $5 million to Harvard Math Professor Martin Novak. It is unclear how much the beneficiaries received, as the estate has shrunk due to taxes and payments to victims. At least one named beneficiary, Mark Epstein, has said he was unaware of being named as a beneficiary to the estate. Faulty redaction techniques in the December 2025 release allowed members of the public to recover blacked out content, revealing information that officials had intended to withhold. Social media users discovered that blacked-out text in certain documents could be revealed by copying and pasting it into another application. The flaw traced back to a 2021 court filing by the Virgin Islands Attorney General's office in a civil racketeering case, which the Justice Department had incorporated into its release. At least 550 pages in the initial December release were entirely blacked out, including a 255-page series of consecutive documents and a 119-page grand jury transcript. Among the recovered content was an unverified FBI tip alleging that Trump had witnessed the killing and disposal of an infant born to a 13-year-old trafficking victim. The January 2026 release drew further criticism over redaction failures. The Justice Department published dozens of unredacted nude images showing young women or possibly teenagers with their faces visible. The images were largely removed after the New York Times began notifying the department. Attorneys for survivors said the names of victims who had never been publicly linked to Epstein appeared unredacted in the files. Wall Street Journal review found that at least 43 victims' full names were exposed, including more than 24 who were minors when they were abused. Some names appeared over 100 times, and home addresses were visible in keyword searches. Brad Edwards and Brittany Henderson, attorneys who had provided the Justice Department with a list of 350 victims on December 4th to ensure their names would be redacted, said the department failed to perform a basic keyword search to verify its redaction process. Edwards said there were literally thousands of mistakes. Victim Alnoskaji Giorgio, who had testified against Ghislaine Maxwell, cited a driver's license was among the exposed materials and accused the government of a profound disregard for the safety, protection, and well-being of victims. The Department of Justice established an email inbox for victims to report redaction errors and said it would remove affected documents pending correction. Attorneys Jennifer Freeman and Sigrid Macaulay criticized the handling of the release. Freeman called the redactions ham-fisted and accused the department of hiding the names of perpetrators while exposing survivors. Department officials acknowledged that many records in the files were duplicates. Reviewers appear to have applied different standards when redacting names and other identifying information, with some documents showing a name left exposed in one copy but redacted in another. On February 1, 2026, attorneys representing more than 200 alleged victims asked federal judges Richard Berman and Paul Engelmeyer to order the immediate takedown of the Justice Department's Epstein Files website, calling the release the single most egregious violation of victim privacy in one day in United States history. Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche defended the department's procedures, saying redaction errors affected about 1% of all materials and that the department moved quickly to fix mistakes when notified. During the 2024 presidential campaign, Donald Trump and his allies pledged to release files related to Jeffrey Epstein, held by the federal government. Trump stated in interviews that he would probably make additional Epstein records public, while allies including J.D. Vance and Donald Trump Jr. accused the Biden administration of concealing a list of Epstein's clients. After taking office, Attorney General Pam Bondi announced in February 2025 that she was reviewing Epstein-related material at President Trump's direction, and the FBI undertook an extensive review of approximately 100,000 records. In July 2025, the Department of Justice released a memo concluding that no client list existed in the Epstein files, that no credible evidence supported claims Epstein had blackmailed prominent individuals, and that his death was a suicide. The announcement drew criticism from Trump supporters and Democratic lawmakers alike. Reporting by the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times subsequently revealed that Bondi had informed Trump in May that his name appeared in the files alongside unverified hearsay, and that officials had advised against public disclosure. Trump characterized the files as falsified documents created by political opponents and filed a defamation lawsuit against the Wall Street Journal over its coverage. On November 19, 2025, Trump signed the Epstein Files Transparency Act, which Congress passed to mandate release of DOJ records related to Epstein. The signing took place without reporters present. Trump and Epstein were acquainted from the late 1980s through the mid-2000s. In a 2002 interview with New York Magazine, Trump called Epstein a terrific guy who likes beautiful women as much as I do, and many of them are on the younger side. Their relationship cooled in the early 2000s. With commonly cited reasons including disputes over employees and a 2004 real estate deal in Palm Beach, Florida, in which Trump outbid Epstein on an oceanfront mansion. In 2003, Trump contributed a letter to a bound album of birthday greetings given to Epstein on his 50th birthday. The Wall Street Journal reported the letter contained suggestive content, which Trump denied writing. In October 2007, Trump revoked Epstein's membership at During the Biden administration, Trump allies, including Kash Patel, Promoted, claims that the FBI was withholding an Epstein client list and urged its release. In a speech at the Turning Point Action Convention in June 2024, Donald Trump Jr. accused the Biden administration of keeping the list secret to protect pedophiles. In October, J.D. Vance said, "We need to release the Epstein list." Trump, despite having brought up a connection between Epstein and Bill Clinton at the 2015 Conservative Political Action Conference, rarely mentioned the Epstein files during this period. Yet, he did not refute his allies' claims. On 2 occasions during his 2024 presidential campaign, Donald Trump pledged to release the Epstein files. In a June 2024 interview with Fox News, when asked whether he would declassify them, Trump responded, Yeah, I would." The clip was shared by an official Trump campaign account on Twitter. The unedited answer aired later shows Trump saying he was not sure he would because you do want to affect people's lives. If it is phony stuff in there, because there's a lot of phony stuff with that whole world. In a September 2024 interview with Lex Fridman, Trump stated he would have no problem releasing additional Epstein files and would probably make the client list public. U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi was asked on February 21, 2025, by Fox News journalist John Roberts whether the Justice Department would publish the list of Jeffrey Epstein's clients, and Bondi replied, "It's sitting on my desk right now to review. That's been a directive by President Trump. I'm reviewing that." On February 27th, she released documents that contained no significant new information. Faced with outcry from a disappointed public, Bondi demanded that FBI Director Kash Patel provide the extensive material she had originally requested from him. Michael Zeidel, the section chief of the FBI's Record Information Dissemination Section, objected to Bondi's order and was forced to resign. The FBI worked on Epstein records for 2 weeks during late March, according to Senator Dick Durbin. He later wrote, "Bondi pressured the FBI to put approximately 1,000 personnel on 24-hour shifts to review approximately 100,000 Epstein-related records in order to produce more documents that could then be released on an arbitrarily short deadline. This effort was haphazardly supplemented by hundreds of FBI New York field office personnel, many of whom lacked the expertise to identify statutorily protected information regarding child victims and child witnesses or properly handle FOIA requests. My office was told that these personnel were instructed to flag any records in which President Trump was mentioned. In the documents, the FBI found dozens of high-profile names, including Trump's. A unit of FOIA officers, citing exemptions in FOIA law, redacted Trump's name because, although he was then a sitting president, he had been a private citizen when the 2006 federal investigation into Epstein began. Lawyer and law professor Alan Dershowitz said in an interview with Sean Spicer on March 19, 2025, that he knew the names of individuals on such a list and unreleased files relating to Epstein, adding that I know why they're being suppressed. I know who is suppressing them and that he was bound by confidentiality from a judge in cases, and I can't disclose what I know. Dershowitz had been part of the legal team that negotiated a non-prosecution agreement for Epstein in 2006. In May, Bondi informed Trump that his name appeared in the Epstein files. She also said that the files contained unverified hearsay about Trump and others, child pornography, and identifying information on Epstein's victims. As such, officials advised that the files should not be disclosed. White House Communications Director Stephen Cheung denied reports that Trump was advised not to release the files, and Bondi said that as part of our routine briefing, we made the president aware of the findings. Shortly thereafter, Bondi canceled her appearance at CPAC's International Summit Against Human Trafficking, citing torn cornea. According to Politico, following the reported briefing in May, Trump appears to have sought to narrow the government's public disclosures to avoid releasing information. On May 8, Patel and Deputy FBI Director Don Bongino told Fox News that Epstein had died by suicide. On June 6, the Joe Rogan Experience aired an interview with Kash Patel. Who's it of the Epstein matter? We've reviewed all the information, and the American public is going to get as much as we can release. He killed himself. Do you really think I wouldn't give that video evidence to you if it existed? On July 6th, 2025, Axios reported that the Department of Justice and FBI had concluded in a 2-page memo that no evidence existed that Epstein kept a client list, blackmailed prominent individuals, or was murdered. The memo also affirmed the medical examiner's finding that Epstein died by suicide. The DOJ publicly released the memo on July 7th, stating it did not uncover evidence that could predicate an investigation against uncharged third parties and would not release further Epstein-related documents. When asked what Bundy had meant in February when she said Epstein material was on her desk, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said Bundy had been referring to the entirety of all of the paperwork related to Epstein's crimes rather than any specific client list. Bundy offered a similar clarification at a cabinet meeting the following day. The administration's position drew criticism from across the political spectrum. Democratic representatives challenged the findings, while right-wing activists and influencers, including the Hodge twins, Alex Jones, Rogan O'Handley, and Liz Wheeler, expressed skepticism. Bundy faced particular criticism from many in the MAGA movement. Podcaster Joe Rogan called the administration's reversal a line in the sand, particularly for supporters who had backed Trump based on promised transparency. At a July 9th White House meeting that included Bundy, Don Bongino, Kash Patel, and Chief of Staff Susie Wiles, Bongino and Patel were reportedly confronted over the memo. Bongino subsequently considered resigning. On August 18th, Bundy and Patel announced that Missouri Attorney General Andrew Bailey would share the deputy FBI director role with Bundy, with Bailey sworn in on September 15th. Some figures supported the administration's account that further disclosure was unnecessary, including Epstein's former attorney David Schoen, who would help negotiate a 2008 plea deal. Beginning in mid-July, Trump characterized the Epstein files as falsified documents created by political opponents, including the Biden administration, Barack Obama, and Hillary Clinton. On July 16th, the Justice Department fired Maureen Comey, the federal prosecutor who had prosecuted Epstein. She is the daughter of James Comey, whom Trump had fired as FBI director in 2017. On July 17th, the Wall Street Journal reported that Trump had written a letter included in a book celebrating Epstein's 50th birthday 22 years earlier. Trump announced on Truth Social that he had instructed Bundy to seek court approval to release any and all pertinent grand jury testimony, calling the ongoing attention a sham perpetuated by the Democrats. Bundy replied that she was ready to move the court tomorrow. Legal observers noted the transcripts were not expected to contain significant new information. The following day, Trump sued the Journal, including 2 reporters, owner Rupert Murdoch, and parent companies Dow Jones and News Corp for defamation. On July 21st, the White House removed a Journal reporter from the press pool for Trump's Scotland trip. The Justice Department's requests to unseal grand jury materials were denied by federal judges. On July 23rd, Judge Robin Rosenberg ruled she could not grant a request for Florida grand jury documents based solely on extensive public interest outside of a legal proceeding, ordering instead that a new case be opened. Ghislaine Maxwell's attorneys opposed disclosure, calling it a broad intrusion into grand jury secrecy, Jeben Maxwell's remaining legal options, and due process rights. On August 8th, the DOJ expanded its request to include grand jury exhibits in both the Maxwell and Epstein cases. Judge Paul Engelmayer denied the Maxwell request on August 11th, ruling that the administration's entire premise that the Maxwell grand jury materials would bring to light meaningful new information about Epstein's and Maxwell's crimes, or the government's investigation into them, is demonstrably false. He characterized the government's public explanations as disingenuous. Judge Richard Berman later denied a similar request for Epstein case materials. Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche met with Ghislaine Maxwell on July 24th and 25th at the U.S. Attorney's Office in Tallahassee. The Justice Department released the interview transcript and audio recording on August 22nd. Maxwell, having been sentenced to 20 years, was incarcerated at FCI Tallahassee at the time of the interviews. She was given limited immunity in the interviews, meaning that her answers to her interviewers' questions cannot be used against her. Blanche is Trump's personal lawyer and his political appointee. The previous year, Blanche had referred to Maxwell's lawyer, David Oscar Marcus, as a friend. Maxwell told Blanche, I certainly never witnessed the president in any of. I don't recall ever seeing him in his Epstein's house, for instance. I actually never saw the president in any type of massage setting. I never witnessed the president in any inappropriate setting in any way. The president was never inappropriate with anybody. CNN noted that Maxwell lied about her own crimes and the crimes of Epstein in the interview, and that she appeared to be attempting to flatter Trump with statements such as, "I admire his extraordinary achievement in becoming the president now, and I like him, and I've always liked him." Regarding Maxwell's credibility during the two-day interview, Blanche told CNN on September 17th it would be impossible for him to assess it, since to determine whether a witness is credible takes weeks and weeks and weeks. He added, "It's really up to the American people to determine if they believe that her answers were credible." George Conway remarked that Todd Blanche's questioning of Ghislaine Maxwell was either a completely or be intentionally crafted not to elicit facts incriminating Trump. Blanche responded, "When I interviewed Maxwell, law enforcement didn't have the materials Epstein's estate hid for years and only just provided to Congress. On July 25th, when a CNN reporter asked Trump whether he planned to pardon Maxwell, he answered noncommittally, 'I'm allowed to do it, but it's something I haven't thought about.' On August 1, the Bureau of Prisons confirmed that. Following the interview, Maxwell was transferred to federal prison camp, Bryan, in Bryan, Texas, a minimum security facility with dormitory-style housing generally considered less unpleasant than other federal prisons. In November, she was reportedly receiving special privileges and planning to apply for a commutation of her sentence. The whistleblower was fired from the prison. Any farmer who has made accusations against Epstein and Maxwell told CNN as Caitlin Collins. Even learning that the DOJ would be meeting with her Maxwell was extremely disturbing. With this prison transfer, I think it again feels like she's getting preferential treatment, and it's really worrying to us about what might be coming next." On August 23rd, family responded to the transcript of the Maxwell-Blanche interview, telling CBS that Maxwell's statements were in direct contradiction with her conviction for a child sex trafficking, and that Blanche had never challenged her about her court-proven lies. The family said that the Justice Department had thereby communicated that child sex trafficking is acceptable and will be rewarded. On September 4th, 2025, political activist James O'Keefe, founder of the far-right group Project Veritas, posted a secret recording with DOJ Acting Deputy Chief of Special Operations Joseph Schnitt. In the recording, Schnitt acknowledges the existence of the Epstein files, saying there are thousands and thousands of pages of files, and that they redact every Republican or conservative person in those files, leave all the liberal Democratic people in those files. Schnitt stated that Maxwell's transfer to a minimum security prison was against Federal Bureau of Prisons policy because she is a convicted sex offender, and that they reoffering her something to keep her mouth shut. He also described Bondi as a yes person and that she wants whatever Trump wants. In response to the recording, Schnitt stated that he had no idea he was being recorded, and said he met the undercover O'Keefe reporter on Hinge. He said his comments were based on what he learned in the media and not from the DOJ. In response, the DOJ asserted Schnitt's statements were false, saying that Joseph Schnitt had no role in the department's internal review of Epstein materials. It posted an iPhone screenshot of an email Schnitt sent to his superiors, describing the recordings as happening over 2 dates in August 2025. As late as November 14, 2025, Trump continued to assert that the files were falsified documents created by political opponents, including the Biden administration, Barack Obama, and Hillary Clinton, referring to the matter as the Democrat hoax. On November 18, 2025, the U.S. House of Representatives approved Epstein Files Transparency Act. In a 427-1 vote, Representative Clay Higgins, a relicast, the only dissenting vote. Later the same day, the Senate unanimously voted to pass the same version of the bill, sending it to Trump's desk. The bill was formally transmitted from the Senate chamber to the president's desk on the morning of November 19, 2025. Victims of Epstein and their advocates pressed Congress to compel disclosure of federal records. Virginia Giuffre's brothers, Sky Roberts and Danny Wilson, and Giuffre's sister-in-law, Amanda Roberts, told reporters in July 2025 that they wanted relevant documents to be released. Amanda Roberts added that Giuffre also said she wanted documents to be released, and that Virginia would have been in favor of transparency and justice. Virginia Giuffre died by suicide earlier in the year. On September 3, 2025, survivors spoke publicly outside the U.S. Capitol, demanding that Attorney General Bundy release all the files. Frustrated with decades of lack of accountability, some survivors announced plans to compile their own internal list of Epstein's associates. Officials continued to withhold information. A month later, accuser Annie Farmer told CNN that creating and releasing their own list was not the most effective way of us moving forward as a group. In July, Democratic Representatives Jamie Raskin and 15 colleagues sent a letter to Bundy, accusing the Justice Department of withholding documents to protect Trump. Representatives Ro Khanna and Mark Veazey introduced separate measures to force the House to vote on requiring release of all Epstein-related records held by the Justice Department. Khanna's measure failed 211 to 210 along party lines. The House Oversight Committee subpoenaed Ghislaine Maxwell in July and issued subpoenas for documents to Bill Clinton, former Justice Department officials, and the Justice Department itself in August. The committee demanded that the Justice Department provide the Epstein files by August 19th. On August 18th, officials informed the committee they would begin providing records on August 22nd. Beginning in September, the committee released batches of documents it had received from the Justice Department and, in response to a subpoena from the Epstein estate, these releases included portions of Epstein's contact records, correspondence, and photographs. FBI Director Kash Patel testified before the Senate Judiciary Committee on September 16th and the House Judiciary Committee the following day. Attorney General Pam Bondi testified before the Senate Judiciary Committee on October 7th and the House Judiciary Committee on October 9th. In September 2025, Representative Thomas Massie RKY and Ro Khanna DCA pursued a discharge petition to force the House to vote on legislation requiring the Justice Department to release the files. Trump and Republican leaders launched a pressure campaign against the effort, with one anonymous official calling signing the petition a very hostile act to the administration. Despite administration opposition, several Republicans broke with party leadership to sign the petition. Nancy Mace, Lauren Boebert, and Marjorie Taylor Greene joined Massie within days. The remaining 214 signatures came from Democrats, with the final signatures provided by James Walkinshaw and Adelita Grijalva after they won special elections to Congress in late September. As the petition neared completion, Trump summoned Representative Lauren Boebert to the White House. Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt confirmed the meeting had taken place on October 8th. Representative Eric Swalwell stated that a lot of House Republicans had privately told him they did not intend to keep defending Trump on the issue. Wheat one salink. This Epstein bomb is about to drop. Representative Khanna predicted that 4050 Republicans might vote for a release, and Massie similarly anticipated that Republican support could snowball. Upon receiving the final signature on November 12th, House Speaker Mike Johnson announced the full House would vote the following week on releasing the Epstein files. Trump's advisors privately informed him that he had lost the issue and that release of the files appeared inevitable. On November 16th, Trump publicly reversed his stance, writing on Truth Social that House Republicans should vote to release the Epstein files. Epstein's brother, Mark Epstein, stated on November 17th that a pretty good source had told him there was a facility in Winchester, Virginia, where they're scrubbing the files to take Republican names out, which he said explained the sudden shift in tone about the release. On November 18th, the House voted 217 to 210 to approve a procedural rule that killed the discharge petition, but guaranteed a vote on the Epstein Files Transparency Act. Later that day, the House passed the act in a 427-1 vote. Representative Clay Higgins RLA cast the only dissenting vote. The Senate unanimously approved the bill the same day. The bill was formally transmitted to the president's desk on the morning of November 19. Trump signed the act later that day without reporters present. The act required the Justice Department to release Epstein-related files by December 19, 2025. Documents related to Epstein and his associates became public through a combination of court-ordered unsealings, congressional releases, Justice Department disclosures, journalistic investigations, and inadvertent leaks. Court documents from the Ghislaine Maxwell defamation case were unsealed in January 2024, though they contained little information not already publicly known. In September 2025, Bloomberg News independently obtained 18,000 emails from Epstein's personal account. Following passage of the Epstein Files Transparency Act in November 2025, the U.S. Department of Justice released files in stages. An initial batch. On the Act's December 19th deadline, which drew bipartisan criticism for extensive redactions and failure to meet the law's requirements, followed by over 3 million pages on January 30th, 2026. Separately, the House Oversight Committee released tens of thousands of pages it obtained from the Justice Department and the Epstein estate, beginning in September 2025. The Justice Department stated that its January 30th release brought it into full compliance with the Act, but lawmakers, including Representative Ro Khanna, disputed this, noting that the department had identified over 6 million pages as potentially responsive, yet released only half that amount. In December 2023, New York Judge Loretta Presko ordered the unsealing of documents from the 2015 defamation case against Ghislaine Maxwell, with a January 1, 2024, deadline for appeals. The court documents released in January 2024 contained little information not already publicly known. Individuals mentioned included Andrew Mountbatten, former presidents Bill Clinton and Donald Trump, former New Mexico Governor Bill Richardson, lawyer Alan Dershowitz, singer Michael Jackson, and physicist Stephen Hawking. Most were mentioned in passing and not accused of wrongdoing. The court documents unsealed in January 2024 contained little information that had not already been public knowledge. Individuals mentioned in the released court documents include Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, formerly Prince Andrew, Duke of York, former U.S. Presidents Bill Clinton and Donald Trump, former New Mexico Governor Bill Richardson, lawyer Alan Dershowitz, singer Michael Jackson, and physicist Stephen Hawking. Most were mentioned in passing and not accused of any wrongdoing. Model scout Jean-Luc Brunel, accused of sexual abuse by one of Epstein's victims, had died by suicide in 2022 in Paris, France, while under investigation for the rape and sex trafficking of minors. In September 2025, Bloomberg News independently obtained approximately 18,700 emails from one of Epstein's personal Yahoo accounts, spanning from 2002 through 2022. The outlet used cryptographic verification, metadata analysis, and corroboration with external sources to authenticate the cache. For independent experts reviewed the methodology and found no meaningful evidence of fabrication. The account was most active from October 2005 through August 2008, with significant gaps after Epstein's incarceration. The emails documented Epstein's relationships with academics at Harvard University and other institutions. Correspondence showed researchers, including psychologist Stephen Koslin and geneticists George Church, proposing Epstein-funded projects such as a Pleasure Genome Initiative, exploring neural correlates of pleasure, and a genetics and brain laboratory to study far-out ideas such as life extension. Developmental psychologist Howard Gardner told Bloomberg he had never had the slightest knowledge or even intimation of the darker sides, and wished he had asked more questions. The cache also revealed aspects of Epstein's legal defense strategy during his 2006 indictment. Notes taken by a research assistant to Alan Dershowitz recorded Dershowitz characterizing accusers as self-described prostitutes who'd feel harmed during a February 2006 meeting with prosecutors. Dershowitz told Bloomberg the memos were privileged lawyer-client communications and that he was acting as any responsible lawyer should, making the case for my client. The emails contained draft public apology letters prepared for Epstein by crisis strategist Mary Spieth, a former Reagan administration media relations director. In February 2008, Spieth coached Epstein on communication techniques, including how to answer questions without being trapped by the parameters, and provided lists of good words and bad words for interviews. Though Epstein expressed interest in one draft, referencing philosopher William James and describing introspection during an hour of terror, he never issued a broad public apology. Spieth told Bloomberg she ultimately terminated the engagement because of my discomfort with it. Beginning in September 2025, the House Oversight Committee released batches of documents it had received from the Justice Department in response to a subpoena from the Epstein estate. On September 2nd, the committee released 33,295 pages of Epstein files, though most of the information was already publicly known or available. The Epstein estate began sending files to the committee on September 8th, including a bound album of birthday greetings Epstein received for his 50th birthday. On September 26th, committee Democrats released 6 pages showing that Epstein had meetings with financier Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, and Steve Bannon. On October 17th, the committee released 8,500 pages from the Epstein estate. These showed that Matthew Minchell, the chief criminal prosecutor at the Miami U.S. Attorney's Office, who was behind Epstein's 2007 plea deal, had apparently personal meetings with Epstein in 2011, 2013, and 2017. On November 12th, committee Democrats released 3 Epstein emails pertaining to Trump, including a 2011 exchange with Maxwell in which Epstein referred to Trump as the dog that has unit barked because Trump had spent hours at my house we'd evict him. Hours later, committee Republicans released 20,000 additional pages from Epstein's estate. Trump was mentioned over 1,000 times, though none of Epstein's emails were sent directly to Trump or his staff. On November 14th, Zetio published a searchable version of the 26,039 documents. In December, the committee released images from Epstein's estate. On December 3rd, it released photos and videos from Epstein's private island, including one showing first names written on a telephone's speed dial. On December 12th, it released photos of people including Trump, Bill Clinton, Steve Bannon, Bill Gates, and Richard Branson. On December 18th, it released additional photos, including Noam Chomsky and Bill Gates. The Justice Department released an initial batch of heavily redacted files on December 19, 2025, the deadline set by the Epstein Files Transparency Act. The release drew bipartisan criticism for failing to meet the law's requirements, with over 500 pages entirely blacked out. Less than a day after the release, 16 files disappeared from the public webpage without explanation. Faulty redaction techniques in the digital files allowed members of the public to recover blacked-out content, revealing information officials had intended to withhold, including details about the trafficking ring's members and methods. By early January 2026, less than 1% of the files had been publicly released. According to a DOJ letter to U.S. District Judge Paul Lane, on January 30th, 2026, the Justice Department released over 3 million pages of documents, 180,000 images, and 2,000 videos related to Epstein. Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche stated that the release brought the department into compliance with the Epstein Files Transparency Act and would be the final major release. Federal prosecutors had initially identified 6 million pages as potentially responsive to the disclosure law, but the DOJ released only half that amount, stating officials had erred on the side of overclaim. Representative Ro Khanna and other Democratic lawmakers disputed the compliance claim and accused the department of violating the law by withholding the FBI 302 victim interview statements, a draft indictment and prosecution memorandum prepared during the 2007 Florida investigation, and hundreds of thousands of emails and files from Epstein's computers. Blanche stated the White House had nothing to do with vetting the documents and that names of powerful men associated with Epstein were not redacted. The DOJ noted that the release may contain fake or falsely submitted material, and in its accompanying statement described certain claims against President Trump as unfounded and false. The department withheld approximately 200,000 pages under various legal privileges, as well as child sexual abuse material or material identifying victims. The Epstein list is a purported document within this body that contains the names of high-profile clients to whom Epstein trafficked young girls. Epstein cultivated a social circle of public figures that included politicians and celebrities, fueling claims suggesting that he maintained such a list to blackmail these associates and that his 2019 death was not a suicide as officially reported, but a murder to protect his clients. Claims surrounding the existence of a client list first surfaced in the immediate aftermath of Epstein's death, later reaching heightened prominence in 2025, following a now-deleted tweet from former White House senior advisor and Department of Government Efficiency associate Elon Musk, alleging that United States President Donald Trump was in the Epstein files. The Trump administration's United States Justice Department, DOJ, released a memo on July 7, 2025, which stated the list did not exist and no credible evidence was found that Epstein blackmailed prominent individuals as part of his actions. We did not uncover evidence that could predicate an investigation against uncharged third parties. The memo was met with skepticism from political commentators across the political spectrum, such as Alex Jones and John Oliver. Epstein's Black Book, or Epstein's Little Black Book, refers to a 97-page book of names, phone numbers, emails, and home addresses a former employee took from Epstein's home in 2005 and later tried to sell it. Gawker published a redacted version in 2015, and an unredacted version was released on 8chan in 2019. A second book of contacts, sometimes referred to as Epstein's Other Little Black Book, was published by Business Insider in 2021 and is dated October 1997. According to investigative reporter Julie K. Brown, Epstein's then-girlfriend, Ghislaine Maxwell, compiled the directory, which included celebrities, as well as Epstein's gardeners, hairdresser, barbers, and electrician. Brown said that the so-called list is really a red herring, and that every time Epstein or Maxwell met somebody important, they would get their contact information, and they would put it in this file. So it was pretty clear that this was not a black book, in the sense that these were all his clients. It was just a phone directory. The DOJ's July 2025 memo stated that no client list exists within the Epstein files, and that investigators found no evidence Epstein used such material to blackmail associates. The memo also affirmed that Epstein's death was a suicide. The release of the documents has resulted in numerous resignations, investigations, and formal inquiries worldwide related to figures and organizations implicated in the Epstein files. Miroslav Lajčák, a national security advisor to the Prime Minister of Slovakia, Robert Fico, and a former president of the UN General Assembly, resigned on January 31, 2026 following a joint statement from opposition politicians calling for his departure and mounting pressure from the media. Fico agreed to and accepted the resignation. Lajčák explained that his interactions with Jeffrey Epstein were strictly professional and social, characterizing them as a necessary part of his diplomatic duties in New York, where Epstein was a well-connected figure who opened many doors. Lajčák claimed he cannot recall any messages or conversations with Epstein about girls. Lajčák acknowledged that the communication was a mistake and unacceptable, stating, "When I read those messages today, I feel like a fool. It was a private conversation. At the very least, I made a poor judgment. I am paying the price for it." On February 1, 2026, British Peter Mandelson resigned his membership of the Labour Party to avoid causing it further embarrassment for being linked in the files. On February 3rd, Mandelson announced his resignation from the House of Lords, effective on the next day. The day of his announcement, the Metropolitan Police announced they would formally launch a criminal investigation into Downing Street Chief of Staff Morgan McSweeney would also resign after taking full responsibility for advising Mandelson's appointment. On February 1st, 2026, the U.S.-Ireland Alliance decided to rename a scholarship that had been known as the George J. Mitchell Scholarship Program, based on allegations, which Mitchell denied, that he, along with Epstein and Maxwell, abused Virginia Jews. The disclosures revived questions about whether the former Prince, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, should cooperate with U.S. authorities. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer suggested on February 1st that Mountbatten Windsor should tell American investigators what he knows about Epstein's activities. Mountbatten Windsor had not responded to a request from members of the U.S. House Oversight Committee for a transcribed interview about his long-standing friendship with Epstein. On February 2nd, 2026, Joanna Rubinstein resigned from her position as the chair of Sweden for UNHCR, a national partner of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. The files revealed that Rubinstein had visited Epstein's private island in 2012, a visit she later confirmed while stating she was unaware of the full extent of his crimes at the time. The Swedish UNHCR board stated they had no prior knowledge of these events and accepted her departure to protect the organization's reputation. A group of Epstein accusers released a statement criticizing the disclosure, saying the documents made it too easy to identify victims while Epstein's enablers continue to benefit from secrecy. Representative Jamie Raskin, the ranking Democrat on the House Judiciary Committee, called for lawmakers to be allowed to review unredacted versions of the files to assess whether redactions were lawful. Representative Robert Garcia of California, the ranking Democrat on the House Oversight Committee, stated that the Justice Department had defied the committee's August 5th subpoena. Unlike the Epstein Files Transparency Act, which permits redactions, the subpoena required Attorney General Pam Bondi to release the full, unredacted Epstein files to the committee, including any classified materials and information tied to ongoing investigations. Deputy Attorney General Blanche stated on February 2nd, 2026, that there would be no additional prosecutions related to Epstein. Blanche said that there was a lot of correspondence. There's a lot of emails. There's a lot of photographs, but added that the materials did not allow us necessarily to prosecute somebody representative. Khanna indicated that he and Representative Massey would consider contempt or impeachment proceedings against senior officials if compliance with the transparency law did not improve. The House was expected to vote on holding Bill and Hillary Clinton in contempt for refusing a subpoena to testify. Attorneys for the Clintons called the subpoenas invalid and legally unenforceable. David Arras resigned as chair of the School of Visual Arts. Several countries announced investigations following revelations that their nationals may have been victimized by Epstein or his associates. On February 3, 2026, Turkish prosecutors reviewed newly released Epstein files as part of an investigation into allegations that he trafficked Turkish children. The Ankara Public Prosecutor's Office had launched the inquiry in December 2025 after opposition. EE Party MP Turhan Kukmez highlighted a reference in the files which reportedly alleged that Epstein transported minor girls from Turkey, the Czech Republic, Asia, and other countries. Also on February 3rd, Lithuanian President called for a law enforcement investigation into potential human trafficking, which Lithuanian prosecutors subsequently announced after the country's media reported that the names of several Lithuanian models and arts figures are in the files. On February 5th, the president of Latvia, Edgars Rinkēns, also called for an investigation after the Latvian public broadcaster reported the Epstein documents included passport data and travel details for several Latvian women. The Latvian state police announced an investigation involving prosecutors and the Organized Crime Bureau into the possible recruitment of Latvian nationals for sexual exploitation in the United States. On February 6, 2026, Norway reportedly planned to open an inquiry backed by Parliament into its foreign ministry after several officials appeared in the files, including former foreign ministers Thorbjørn Jagland and Borg Brand and diplomat Mona Juul and her husband Terje Rudler. A December 2025 Reuters poll found that 23% of Americans approved of Trump's handling of the Epstein case. A January 2026 CNN poll found that 49% of Americans were dissatisfied with how much of the Epstein files the federal government has released so far, while 6% were satisfied. Two-thirds of respondents said the government was deliberately withholding information. The Epstein case is not just about one man. It's about power, influence, silence, and the uncomfortable truth that some stories never reach full daylight. The files answered questions, but created even more. And perhaps the most important question is still unanswered. How much do we really know? Because when the most powerful people in the world appear in sealed documents, the truth becomes harder to find and easier to bury. History will remember the name Jeffrey Epstein, but the real story may still be locked inside the files. Imagine what's not.